Adjournment to call the meeting to order. Technical difficulties have apparently been addressed, so we are live and being preserved for posterity. I know a lot of people have hobbies to go back and look at select board meetings from a couple of years ago on YouTube, and I didn't want any of that to be disturbed. So here we are. So the first order of business is the minutes from July 15th, 2025. Is there a motion?
Move to approve subject to modification.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Going through page 1. Page 2.
More of a, so the town comprehensive plan discussion, we had a kind of a fairly long discussion about making sure that none of the changes were substantial enough to have to drive another hearing. That's not really reflected in the minutes. It is in the, later on, the planning commission mentions it. I don't know if it would be important. Should we get challenged for not having a second hearing that was in minutes? Yes. How about just at the end, we just say, see the other words they use were, there was a agreement that none of the changes were substantial enough to that we believe there was no changes in planning board commission's decision, but there was discussion that the select board did not believe any of the changes made would be considered substantial.
Okay. Anything else on that page? Page 3.
At the top of page 3, I disagreed with the approach and recommended wider community engagement on the voting. While not having a special election, it should be during the regular town meeting day and the town vote. I disagreed with a special election, wasn't it? I don't know, I would change that, but should mention election.
Something to the effect of Mr. Isham was not in favor of a special election on the issue.
Correct. I wanted more vote, I wanted to make sure we had full voter participation.
Sure.
Also, down below, I mentioned that of the budget, 35, like we are currently spending 8% of the non-personnel budget on capital and bonds, but with the library and the other, and the fire department, new fire truck, the ambulance, and the communication tower would and the library would represent over 35%. I lost my screen.
Do you have a proposed language you want substituted in?
Of the $15 million municipal budget, after salary and wages and benefits are paid out, there's 3.75 million left. We're currently spending 8% of what's left on capital and bonds. With what we've got coming up, we're going to be spending over 35%. It was the ratio of bonds to running the town. I asked if we could have, what is normal for a town ratio of debt.
What you asking me?
Mr. Isham said that this would, this is this reflecting what you think you said, and I agree you said this. Mr. Isham, sorry, said that we're currently spending 8% of non-personnel budget on capital and bonds, and the current projects would raise this to 35%.
over
for his
35%.
projects. Yeah, if you wanted to understand how that related to other towns.
Correct, what that ratio is.
There is that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay,
Thanks.
sounds good. Anything else on page 3? Page 4. Subject to the modifications, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay, the ayes have it. Next, public comment. This would be a moment where anybody in the public can make a comment. Can be on something that is in the agenda, it does not have to be. If you want to wait until the agenda item comes up, that's fine too, but is there anybody in the room that wishes to make a public comment? Seeing no volunteers, Eric, is there anybody online? Nope. Town comprehensive plan. Oh, actually, we're just a little bit short, we're starting public hearing too soon, but we're actually calling it late.
Okay.
So, to conform to the statute requirements, I will read as follows. The Williston Selectboard pursuant to 24 VSA sections 4384 and 4385 will hold 2 public hearings to receive public comment and consider adoption of the proposed 2025 through 2033 Williston Comprehensive Plan. The hearing will be held in the Beckett McGuire Meeting Room on the 2nd floor of the Williston Town Hall, 7900 Williston Road, Williston, Vermont. Remote participation via Zoom will also be available. This is the second hearing today, Tuesday, August 19th, 2025. Starting slightly after scheduled time of 7:05. So with that, the hearing is called to order. Eric, do we have? Lynn,
Greetings,
greetings.
select board members, planning commission members, staff, members of the public. We're at the final stage of adoption of the 2025 to 2033 comprehensive plan. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge all of the great efforts that went into this plan, including all of the engagement by members of the public, the many months the planning commission and staff spent drafting the plan, the select board's thoughtful discussions and input into the plan over many meetings the past several months. So thank you. I think all of those efforts made the plan a really good plan. So with that, tonight, the draft being heard incorporates the inclusion of changes that we made on July 15th, which was the first public hearing. We are recommending and hoping that you consider a motion to adopt the plan tonight. You may choose to adopt the plan as drafted, or if you decide that further changes are needed, those changes can be made, but would require an additional public hearing. At least one additional public hearing. If the plan is not adopted by August 25th, 2025, the current plan will expire and no longer be valid. The town is required to have a valid plan in place to adopt for amending bylaws or to apply for certain state grants. So I've listed the changes that were made by the select board in the memo that was in your packet. And Vermont statute requires that if any changes are made, even if they're relatively insubstantial, at the first public hearing, the planning commission has to kind of take a look at those changes, decide whether those changes affect the plan's compliance with state statute, or consistency with state planning goals. So the planning commission did just meet right before this public hearing. And took a look at the changes, and they have determined that they're not substantial, and when taken together with the rest of the plan. The plan is still consistent with the legislative goals. Including the 4 planning process goals, the 15 specific goals, and the 12 required elements. The attached amended bylaw report provides a detailed explanation of how the 2025 comprehensive plan meets the requirements related to comprehensive planning in state statute.
Great. It is a public hearing, so I think the best way to proceed is initially ask the board members if they have any questions or comments or and we'll open it up to the public. Anybody from the board have any questions or comments?
Thank you for the summary, it was
Yeah.
accurate and thorough.
Great job.
So people are invited to come up and offer their comments, if any. So is there anybody who wishes to come up and have their input for the hearing? Taking that as a no. Eric, is there anybody online?
Nope, no one online.
If that is the case, then I think the chair would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
They move to adopt the
Oh,
twenty.
not yet. To close the public hearing.
One minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Move to close the public hearing of the new town comprehensive plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays. The public hearing is closed. That will bring us to the actual consideration of the comprehensive plan. It's the board's plan.
You want to comment or you want the motion?
It's up to you.
I move to adopt the 2025-2033 town comprehensive plan as presented. I'll second. But I did not.
Any discussion on the motion?
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll come back to thanking everybody for all the really hard work. I just want to say that there are certainly things in the plan that I'm really excited about. There are things that I'm less excited about. I'm sure there are people who would feel exactly the opposite direction on the same 2 things. But this really isn't about me. It's not about the select board. It's really about the direction the town wants to move in. And I'm comfortable that the huge effort that we're going to gather public input for the plan was well done, and people have had a chance, and I think that's really what we can do. And I'm sure we will hear soon about I didn't know anything about it, but it's really hard to take it seriously given the amount of effort that's gone into developing a plan that people who care about the town care about. I'm gonna have to vote yes for it, though I probably continue to find the things that I question, but I think that in general, it's a really excellent document. And I appreciate all the hard work that went into it.
Any other comments from the board? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Comprehensive plan is adopted. So congratulations to everybody involved. We're a little anticlimactic, but a lot of.
Thank you so much to all of our planners.
Thank you. Well done.
So next on the agenda will be an interview and appointment for the Chip and Solid Waste District. David. Welcome, and thank you for putting your application. Could I ask you to just give a general overview of your background and why you want this in?
Sure. And my name is David Howell. I've lived in Williston with my wife and 2 children since 2017, in Chittenden County since 2010. I worked professionally as a software developer and have for 18 years. Prior to that, I was in graduate school studying physics. Outside of work and parenting and all that, I'm also a member of Sustainable Williston. We have a policy in my family that everything that enters the house has to have an exit strategy. I think you may have all realized, seeing this yourselves, it's often much easier to acquire things than get rid of them. And I'm applying this board seat because I've been thoroughly impressed in the time I've lived here with how much effort into education and outreach and just facilities CSWD puts into making it easier for people like me to responsibly keep things out of the waste stream when possible and dispose of them responsibly when not. To me, I feel a bit of civic pride every time I go to the drop-off site, seeing how seriously in Vermont things like this get taken. I'm from Indiana; it's a little different in Indiana. Yeah, I think for me it would just be an honor to be able to take part in that mission, helping to be good stewards of our environment, support infrastructure that undergirds all our communities here, and serve the town of Williston while I'm at it.
Thank you. So I will ask the first question because it's a little bit awkward, I suppose. It's, as with anything in a small community, it's possible to have a conflict of interest arise between some other party in life and your duties forward. So it's a two-part question. How would you recognize a conflict of interest? And if you did recognize one, what would you do with that?
Well, I suppose I think the main thing I think of when I think of like what conflict of interest that came up would be if I had financial stake in something that CSWD was doing. And I think in that case, my gut tells me I would probably start with Eric and talk to him about how to deal with that conflict, since he's had experience with past commissioners on the board. Probably just look for a little help from folks who have been a little more experienced in this.
Great, thank you. Questions from the board?
Are there any particular initiatives or strategies, priorities from CSWD that you've seen in your research that you're particularly enthused by?
Well, so I have been interested in the recycling in particular, and in the past I've seen from CSWD's blog that they posted about how they handle different kinds of materials and the recycling facility. So I'm particularly interested in that. I know that many plastics are difficult to actually effectively recycle. And I've seen that CSWD has put effort into finding actual good uses for materials like processed glass aggregates and construction. To me, I think where in many other parts of the country recycling is seen as kind of fruitless these days. I very much appreciate that CSWD is putting effort into finding better outcomes for recycled materials. So I'm very interested to see how the MRF project proceeds and whether there's other opportunities for marketing those materials.
Thanks.
One of the unique things about the member from Williston is that we're the host town. I'm not saying there would be any kind of additional friction or difficulties or something like that. Sometimes there is parting of the ways between what CSWD wants to do and what the town does, and just bringing your attention to it more than asking a question that might be something that you will have to finesse and navigate. Just want you to go in with the eyes open. We have not in any way had people say, oh my God, it's a shouting match, and what a terrible thing to thought civic duty in Vermont wasn't like this or anything like that, because it's not like that. But I just want you to be aware that that is part of the landscape. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Motion to be in order.
I'll move to appoint David Howell as Williston's Commissioner to the Chittenden Solid Waste District Board of Commissioners for an unexpired term through June 20th, 2027.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No nays, the ayes have it. Congratulations. Thank you.
I'm sweating now now.
Yeah. Great
Oh,
change.
You're sweating it.
Yeah.
Okay, Village Vibrancy Project. Eric, you're gonna lead that?
Yeah, I'll kind of just reset the conversation, and we've got our library director and the trustees to as well. So this agenda item is for continued discussion about our village vibrancy project encompassing the library addition and renovation and refresh of the town green space. Staff is seeking direction from the select board on whether it would like to proceed with the project. If so, staff seeks direction on the final project scope and timing for a future bond vote. Should the select board wish to proceed, the scope is transmitted, work could begin on launching a capital campaign effort to the early this fall. Should the select board wish to modify the scope of the project in relation to its overall estimated budget, staff's suggestion is to provide that feedback to the trustees through the town manager, the task the design committee for the project to revise the scope and arrive at an updated design for further discussion in coming months. If that's the direction from the select board, the revised project cost target would be helpful in design work with a caveat the cost of the project is going to increase over time, no matter what the scope is as we've seen inflation. Summer doesn't need to make those decisions this evening if it has additional questions or information sought from staff. Staff suggests having the project scope determined for the bond vote prior to any work on a capital campaign occurring, so we know what the scope is before any fundraising effort gets underway. Well, I'll pause there and turn things over to our director, Kevin Unrath, members of the trustees, and we're going to recap the select board community on why this project's been developed and of discussion. Great.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Manager Wells. Before I get started, I noticed that Joanne Arsenault, the president of our Friends, is in the audience, and I didn't know I'm going to do this, but they just had the most successful book sale ever, raising more than $8,000, and I think she has a cloning machine because she was everywhere. Jim, I just wanted to publicly thank her for all the work she does to lead the Friends to raise money for the library. So thank you, Jim. Thanks to the select board for consideration of this project. My name is Kevin Unrath. I started in April as the director of the Dorothy Allen Library. Glad to be here, but I've been a librarian for 27 years. This has been my own career. I wanted to share some insights just into the importance of having a good public library in the community, some statistics from our library, and then introduce a couple of our trustees to get some details about the project under discussion tonight. Before I became a librarian, I was a library user since as young an age as I can remember. My family was of modest means, so we didn't know where the fanciest restaurants were in town, but we definitely knew where the public library was. There are many who live in Williston, St. George, who depend on the public library as a place they can go to learn and grow without barrier to cost. Last year, we circulated more than 130,000 items. That's a record for our library. About half of those in the children's room. We had someone talking recently about interest in recycle, who was appointed to a board. We saved more than 1,000 trees with the number of books we circulated last year. So libraries have been recycling for about 150 years in the space. But I actually did the math on it. A typical afternoon, we'll see families bringing stacks of books to the circulation desk, coming back in a few weeks for more, on their way to a soccer game or from a birthday party. Those 130,000 items would have cost borrowers $2.6 million if they had to purchase those items instead of borrowing them from the library. And our operating budget is less than half of that. So if you're fiscally minded, a library is a very good return on investment for a community. And that's just items circulated. We also have a lot of shared space in the library. So we have students that come over from Williston Central School each weekday after school. We have hundreds of programs that we offer for kids. Our summer reading program just ended. We do that both so that kids have something to do over the summer and also so they avoid that summer slide where they're not reading over the summer and they regress in their reading. So we have kids log their reading minutes, and children and some of our adults read more than 600,000 minutes this summer in the summer reading program. That's an important program. Libraries are really the only free space in the community, along with our parks and community centers, where a person can come from any background and just be there without having to buy a cup of coffee, without having to pay to get in there. We serve many seniors in addition to children and families. We have an audio collection, a large print collection, outreach services to all our senior communities. You've seen our bookmobile, I'm sure. Book clubs, educational programs, space for gatherings. We're heavily used by older adults. We provide connections and activities that help them combat loneliness. Our library currently, even though it's somewhat cramped for space, provides space for meetings, programs, tutoring, telehealth meetings, work, Zoom calls, and much more. We're actually an official state cooling center. So when we have 95-degree days, people can come to the library if they don't have an air-conditioned home. And of course, during the cold months, they can come and read a book and cozy up with that. As you know, since the last edition, the population of Williston has grown more than 50%. Our library usage has increased even more than that. We have the most programs attended and the most program attendance, the second most circulation of a peer group of 10 libraries in similar sized towns. We're 8th in terms of our building size. So the library, just like the town, is governed by library trustees who volunteer their time and their efforts to steward the library. They put a lot of thought into the space needs that we've had over the last several years. I'm going to invite a couple of our trustees to talk briefly about how this project came about and some of the expected benefits. And I'll start with Carla Karstens, who's here, and she is the chair of the Schematic Design Advisory Committee that came up with the plan that's before you. Carla.
Hello, everybody. How are you? So I'm going to provide some background on the project and also an explanation of why cost figures have increased. A library addition had been under discussion initially by the trustees almost a decade ago. Here's a quote from the library's strategic plan from 2018. The library needs to plan for an increase in the size of its facilities. Possible ways to accomplish this include an expansion in the current location, a branch library, a new dedicated library building at a different location, or partnering with the recreation department to build and staff a multi-use municipal building, which would include a community center and library recreation department. An expansion or new building would require a substantial investment in time, energy, and resources to ensure solutions that would preserve the unique place the library holds in the hearts and minds of the community. We strongly encourage the process to begin very soon with the goal of completion within 10 years. So that was 2018. So at the time, it seemed like a daunting task, and it was put on the back burner. And the library made do, like many places do, with its current building. But then, with the ARPA funds, we were able to get things underway in a positive direction. The current plans evolved from the 2023 scoping study, which showed expanding the library as a high priority. The scoping study tested the various possibilities that trustees had enumerated in 2018 and landed squarely on expanding in the current location as the community preferred option. This was also the most cost-effective, since it would be an expansion on an already available site. So that was another plus for the project. Then all through 2024 and early 2025, a design was developed by project architect John Hemmelgarn, a Williston architect with the firm Black River Design. The schematic design committee was made up of trustees, library staff, and residents, and met publicly for an entire year to further refine the project, initially envisioned in the scoping study. The design incorporates many elements that Williston residents told us were important to them with an eye to keeping costs low as much as possible. For instance, using heat pumps. It also includes a new entrance and parking lot to the library, which will make a trip to the library safer, with patrons not having to back into library lane traffic. Well, that's a little bit about the scoping study, or about the design study. Now the cost, big issue. It's important for the select board to know why cost estimates have increased on this project. The initial $8 million estimate from the scoping study did not include any site costs because it had not yet been determined where the site would be. The site costs make up over $2 million of the current costs.
Additionally, the scoping study envisioned 9,000 additional square feet, while the final design that meets all the programmatic needs of the library ended up at a little over 11,000 square feet. The great majority of this extra space was included to provide additional meeting room and study room capability, which was something that was spoken to during the scoping study and all along with what we heard from Wilson residents. That brought us to that $13.5 million price tag that we had originally. But then the cost per square foot, both for the expansion and the renovation, increased between the time the initial estimate was made and when the building would break ground due to inflation. So that brought us to our current 15. So that explains the progression. And we have John Hillmore here to provide more details if you have any questions for him. And so now I'd like to introduce Steve Perkins, also here.
Sure, thanks, Carla. So I'm Steve Perkins, I'm a library trustee, and I think perhaps asked to speak along the design committee with Carla, but also a historian by profession and a person with deep ties to the library here in Williston. The Williston Library provided library services since 1905, so 120 years this year, which is quite exciting for this town. And then building the first iteration of the library there, the little brick library in the 1950s. My grandmother and her friend Helen used to knock were the two volunteer librarians that ran that library when it opened in that red brick space. And as a child, I attended story hour in the basement of that building. And as an elementary school student, I think read every single book on dinosaurs that they had. Williston's always had a very small library compared to the amount of usage it gets. So even at that time, Williston was much smaller at that time. It was already very crowded. Taking students in the little basement, if you've been in the basement of that historic building for story hour. I then worked at the library as a student assistant when I was in high school. At that point, it was the second iteration of the library, the next expansion, which we thought was absolutely huge. But sure enough, within a few years, it was just absolutely packed. And then I came back in college and served as a fill-in circulation librarian, the next iteration of the library. So experienced all of that. And when finally moving back to Williston for good, I found it very important to give back to the community and the library that I'd love to serve on the board. And seeing what amazing things this library does for its community, has always done for its community. We've always been crowded, and we're really crowded. And that's what we've been talking about here. So to the point, these library editions that I just described, put on in the 80s and the 90s, I believe 86 and in 97, added about 3,000 to 4,000 square feet each, and provided about 20 years or one generation of additional functionality. But we're now over capacity. Usage keeps increasing while space is not, resulting in overfull shelves, overbooked event space, and general crowding that detracts from a central goal of any library, which is to provide a pleasant space to read, study, and work free from distraction. A few numbers that were pulled together and presented to us as trustees I found quite interesting. We have a lot of library card holders here in Williston. And current library card. In fact, there are more library card holders right now than we had the entire population of the town in 1990, which was right between the last two editions. So, and then another piece here. Over the last 25 years, our circulation and our visitation has increased by about 67% for visits, 58% increase in circulation over those 25 years. The population growth of Williston as a whole during that same period is 35%. So not only is Williston growing, but use of the library is growing at an even faster pace than growth of the town. So this addition, as currently envisioned at 11,000 additional square feet, is designed to provide multiple generations, 50 to 75 years of additional functionality. Being on the design committee, I can say that the warm and cozy feel of the current space that I grew up in is still maintained in this addition. But there will be many improvements to that function. As Carla said, additional large programming spaces. And that was something we heard loud and clear from Williston residents, that it was a need for this town. And so a good chunk of this addition is meeting space. And that's usable after hours. It's designed such that it doesn't impact the library in general. Also includes small meeting rooms for tutoring, studying, remote work, and telehealth visits. Again, something that we're asked for all the time. They make do as best they can, but something Willishtonians need or have asked for. Also additional space for collections. Our shelving is completely full. I know some people get frustrated when they go in and they say, well, I can't find the next book in the series, or I need more adult fiction. Why don't they have, well, we don't have room for it. If we have room for it, we would be able to provide it. And then the last piece is the improvements to the town green. And this, I think, was a pleasant part of the project and very interesting, and got me very excited about the project in general. That it really activates the town green. It makes it exciting as a center of our community. Safer parking is a big part of that, but also the improved pedestrian traffic flow and the usability of the green, with the kind of area for performance space, moving those walkways around. I think it makes the whole thing work. So as Williston and St. George have continued to grow, the library has strived to meet its needs since 1960. With an addition in 1986 and another in 1998, say 97, it's 98. Now we are planning for our library's future for the next several decades. This project is not a small one. A $15 million bond will result in an estimated property tax impact of approximately $115 per year for the median home assessed at $300,000. We do hope that voters may be given the chance to decide if that money well spent.
So 11,000 is the size of the addition. Can you remind me how much the renovation, is?
The renovation of 11,000 extra square feet.
But the addition, I'm taking 15 million divided by 11,000 square feet and getting an exorbitant cost per square foot. So I think I'm missing the renovation of the existing building.
It's another 11,000.
Another 1,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's about.
Less.
Oh, sorry.
How much, 9,000?
93 now. Other questions from the board?
I believe it is also part of the town green upgrades in the parking lot. Not just a library expansion.
Yeah, I think back to the $2 million, $2 million parking lot too, right? So I would think Eric said, I don't think the town green was a $2 million project.
No, the site subtotal is about 2.4 million, and of that, about 830,000 is the green, and 1.5 million is for the library site for the extension.
Excavation stuff hadn't been in the first. I mean, I can understand maybe the parking lot not being in the first assessment, but we didn't think you'd need to dig a hole for the building it.
Well, just the building itself, just not knowing what the site would be until it was decided on.
So. As board's input on this, I think. My inclination would be to ask for more input from people here tonight, if they have any comments or information. It's not a public hearing, but I could ask if people have additional comments or information.
Well, just before, we spent a lot of time, I have never voted against a library renovation. I will never vote against a library renovation or expansion. I totally agree with everything that's being said tonight. My concern is not with the library. My concern is with this expense and what it means to other town projects. So there are people who are passionate here. are they all gonna come out and help us when we need to expand the fire department, or when we need to put up the emergency tower? Or when we need to put people, coming because we really need a safe way to get from, the village to, down to Task Corners, and there's no bike path. How about, right after this, we're gonna talk about another project down, South Brown Mill. We have so many needs, and I just don't feel like I don't have a grasp in my head that over the next decade, what are all these bonds gonna do to our tax rate? And so, at the end of it, that's what I'm gonna ask, so I'm happy to hear people want to talk about libraries, but nobody should ever believe that I'm a 50 book a year reader. I thank God for the library, it's Kindle, but, I will never, it's not about the library, it's not about me not supporting the library, it's about the community center will be a bigger and bigger issue as all these other things happen, and I just want to have all the facts on the table before.
If I can just address that a little bit. The library is ready to go now. And it took about 3 years for us to get to this point. So any of those other projects that you're envisioning.
Oh, yes, I wouldn't pile them all on top.
No, but I mean, like, that would all be further down the road and, things are gonna change. This project for the library is not gonna get any less expensive.
Point taken, I understand that.
And it's ready to go, well.
It's not ready to go now, we're not gonna vote on it until the spring, so we have time to do the math.
But it is, there has been a lot of work to get to this point.
And I appreciate that, yeah. I have a lot of school bonds under my belt, I know what it takes to get through.
So if I don't want to sound like a mean person when I say this, but if you're like to make a comment, just that you are in favor or you are opposed with facts or data or arguments that we've already heard, I'd ask to maybe not take the time tonight, but if there's anybody who has an additional, asset, focus or perspective on it, if you want to just stand up and say a very quick word or two, I encourage you to do so.
I just, one of the important aspects, I think, is every time we want to put a book in the library right now, we have to take another book off the shelf. We're that crowded. So, I mean, there's nothing more we can do. We're stuck.
I'd just like to second what Jean mentioned about the cost of bonds in the town. Right now, 75% of the municipal budget is wages and benefits, so we're running the entire town on $3.75 million. Okay, and if this, with the ambulance and the fire truck and the communication tower coming in, not including any of the other projects that we're looking at by doing this library budget, be about 38% town budget will be going towards capital bonds. Over a third town budget will have been spent before we even blacked off a road, replace a culvert, replace the sewage pumps one of the main pumps that we have in town, or do any other projects in town. Over a third of the budget will be just on capital bonds that we have to pay every year. So it's just being financially fiscal is what we're trying to be. This started out, as you mentioned, an $8 million project, we're up to 15.
Well, no, I think it's misleading to say that it started out as an $8 million project.
I think it's probably gonna be closer to 20 before it's done, just like the CSWD building was 25% over what they proposed, just because of the cost of everything today, inflation right now is skyrocketing.
I think I don't know what you base those numbers on, to tell you the truth, because I think John gave a very reasonable update. From the 13.5 to the 15, with the inflation, counted in there.
Inflation is rising rapidly.
Another reason to make a fast decision on
Well, fast decisions aren't always the right decision.
Well, in fairness, the project has been going on for 3 years in this iteration, so a fast decision it is not. I wanna say fully understand, I think, having, been on the original scoping committee. What we heard again, and I mentioned last time, with the pool. And that is another thing we have to look forward to, but I've had a lot of time in the past month since we last talked about this to really kind of think about this. And the world and the shape of our country is changing really fast right now. And it's really made me reflect on the value of the library, the value of the home that we have for the facts and the truth and the history of our country. And our best resource for that in this town is this library. It's our best resources, community and for connections and for children and adults and intergenerational gatherings. And for people, regardless of who they are and how much money they have or what they believe, to come together and all have access to the same resources. It's a great equalizer. And I think that we need to leave it up to the town to decide. It is a huge dollar amount, but this is a community resources and therefore the community needs to decide. And I think it's, that we need to bring it before the town, and let them choose if this is how we're going to spend our town's resources, so.
And as I said last time, I 100% agree with everything you just said, but I also think that if the community center was a year ahead of the library being ready, the library people would certainly hope that we took their project into account before we get a decision on the community center. It's just sort of fair, like we have a lot of needs, first in with blinders on, it's not the way that I normally operate. I would just like to lay it all out, and it could be that, as you said, it's gonna be years before these other things show up. Some will be faster, some will be slower, some will have additional money associated with them, and maybe it'll all come out to be, this looks, with the town growth of the grand list, this looks like it's very reasonable, and then I'll be able to get to 100%. So all I'm really asking, and I've asked this a couple times, I think, I just haven't maybe been quite clear enough what I'm looking for, but I just wanna see those capital projects all laid out with what the tax rate implications would be, and then, like I said, Greta, I don't disagree with everything you said. I highly value the library. And we'll definitely do a project.
So I have a question, and maybe this is kind of relevant, but is there even a site that has been found for the proposed rec center?
But it's not that, it's like I can show you the list, Colin, there's 12 things that we're considering bonds for right now. And that's just probably the last one on the list. So not priority one, it's just likelihood of getting all the ducks in a row to do it is probably low, but there's a lot on this, so I don't need to make two things competing. I just want to lay it out. You know how much bonds cost, we can lay them out in a reasonable fashion, we can figure out how much the tax rate's gonna go up, given some assumptions on growth. And it could be very reasonable, in which case I can be more behind helping get this thing, done. But I think we have the time, to get this done the next month, it's not gonna hold anything up, except for fundraising. Right.
It's just looking back, what Shirley prepared for the last meeting, we tried to do the capital outlay for the next 7 years or so with the fire engine and the communications tower included with the library debt service. I just want to follow what you're looking for.
Yeah, it was pretty close, it just doesn't have all the other stuff on here. Where's the roundabout, where's the rec path there, where's all the things that we just said we were gonna support in the town plan, there's just a lot more stuff than you on here.
And some of the tricky part with those projects is we may have some preliminary cost estimates. We can make some assumptions with that. And it's also kind of understanding from the select board, any direction on timing, because part of this is, as debt is paid off or replacing it with debt at certain points in time, then we have to try to project what the overall operating budget's going to be in these outlying years as well. And we could probably do that fairly accurately for the next 3 years or so, but as we get to the 5, 7, 10-year mark, we have to make more and more assumptions there. Right now, a penny on the tax rate raises is about $220,000. We were thinking about $800,000 or so in new debt in FY27. It's about 4 cents on the tax rate. That's not accounting for if we needed to not borrow the full amount, we were to offset some of that. It's fundraising. And maybe raised $1-2 million, it's a little less. But yeah, it's the sum of all parts. So you have the new debt service coming into play, also operating costs for personnel and you just got other capital costs for equipment replacements. As we try to move away from some funding sources and try to have sustainable capital funding for equipment as well. But we can arrange all that information, whatever way is helpful, or I just want to preface it that we can only be as accurate as what there's gonna have to be some assumptions on steps.
Oh, there'll be a lot of assumptions. We're also gonna have to try to estimate the grants growth, right? There'll be a lot of assumptions. I would just
Yeah.
like to see who we have.
And the tricky part of the grand list too is as we're seeing some property valuations come online, 1-2% growth. Our yield with that 1% growth, the taxes off of it is like, that's $40,000 or so. So when we have the reappraisal in a few years, that will grow the grand list, we'll have a whole kind of quotation at that point, but that would probably buy out the tax really bit, just because the value of properties is gonna increase with the appraisal. It's kind of all the variables at play. I just want to know what the board is looking for, so we can provide that summer.
Well, I've got a penciled in list of all the things we've talked about wanting to add to the town, so I can certainly send that to you and, you know, happy to have a discussion if that helps, but.
Well, I also agree with Greta, I support the library, you know, I think we should let the voters decide on this. It's important that the community then use the library. Decide on whether, the library expansion. I think there's been a lot of confusion on the name of the project, I've had people call me and ask me, when's the library coming up? I think we should, make sure that we put this to the voters, we should do it in March. During the regular election, and we should call it what it is, the library expansion or something similar that everybody can relate to and understand it. If somebody wants a library expansion, you wanna make sure they understand what they're voting for also. The Village Vibrancy name is confusing, to a lot of people. I've heard from, I've gotten a couple of calls today asking me what was going on.
Yeah, certainly, at the end of the day, it's a select project, so however you want to share the project with the community, staff and support the board in whatever way you select. Certainly when the warning, if you go to a bond vote, the way the warning is written, would be explicit about what that bond encompasses, that council would advise us on.
So it's important to be a good turnout, people that vote, they're the ones that ultimately pay the bills to make the decision.
So I understand the need and the urgency, and I'm very supportive. And this might be a silly question, because if the answer is yes, the conversation might be a little different tonight, but in my day job, a lot of the capital projects that I've been involved in that have seen escalating costs have adjusted and phased the projects over time. And if this project is adding, 70 years of capacity, is there any way that we could do a first chunk and then spend some time doing more capital fundraising and trying to bring down that overall cost for the town?
Spread it out.
Yeah.
Well, there's two different things. One is the spreading it out, because we've talked about briefly about like, if you get an approval for the whole 15 million, you may only take a bond for 5.
Oh,
And take a bond for the rest, but that's different than what you're talking about, which is perhaps you designed the building so that it has. You do this much now and you add this much later, like Alcorn School.
Well, the way it's going, if it goes forward, the way it would be organized would be the expansion would be done first. With the library working, open to the public, and then the renovations would be done second.
Would it be possible to phase that over more time so we could raise more capital kind of in the interim, or would the price escalation make that?
Yes.
So. No, I was saying. So, yeah, who I am. I'm a citizen, and so as a citizen, the first thing I want to say, I said this, is I hope tonight, if I get a chance to speak. I thank you for the parking lot.
Which did not pass on 3 months.
I know it. And it's coming in here every other week for a DRB meeting, it was nuts. No. Yes, it is possible to do that, and it's more feasible with some projects than others. We haven't really looked at that on this project, whether you could build half of it now and half of it in 10 years, that's really what it would
Yeah,
be. So that they could take its turn in Gene's lineup. It's gonna be challenging upon first thought here of that because of its location. It's going to be a lot of disruption in a spot that is a very public place. So there's gonna be some real costs associated, and they're incorporated in this estimate. With doing it on a constricted site, I mean, there's gonna be twice a day for most of the year when the contractors are gonna be told, no, you can't have any deliveries, don't come and go because the country transit is going. So it's gonna be difficult to do that if we want to do that again. Those kind of costs that come with every project, the mobilization and whatnot, are gonna then be duplicated. Now, it's offset by the fact that it's later, on the other hand, those costs go up. And here's. So,
I just worry about us not being able to sell a $15 million bond to voters and getting nothing, so. Like, if it's possible to do half now and half later, then
there's
you know,
no.
it's not ideal, but.
There's no easy way to do that, I mean, I tried to think about that, I mean, which piece do you not do? And I'm not even gonna start to throw ideas out right now, there's, that I can come up with, I mean, want to go back to the drawing board and go back to the design committee, that's one of the first things to do, is that how do we make this budget smaller? Which services do we not provide that we've been talking about, you know? We don't wanna say the parking lot, I mean, that's something that wouldn't happen, but you know, it's that kind of a thing, so which piece, okay, that was important. You know, do you only do half the market? I don't know. While I've got the floor, every time I find something might be said, you use the term financially fiscal, and I'm not sure what that means. But I can say that my experience is not as much with public libraries, so the process is very similar, but I've done a boatload of school construction projects, and it's a very similar process, and they're funded in very similar way. And we include a significant contingency, which is part of that $15 million, that makes sure that we're not gonna be over that budget. It is something that I worry about on every project, because we don't go in with a fat budget. We go in with the budget, we think we need to do this, we put some contingencies on it to allow us to find things we weren't expecting. To allow the fact that, oh, all of a sudden elevators just went up by 30%, everything else was going up by 10. That allow you to do that so that we can successfully complete every project on the budget that was sold for us. So, it's there that. And you said something about a fast decision as well. This is not a fast decision. And I'm not even talking about what you're describing.
Referring to from now until March, it's really fast.
I mean, at some point, we have to make a decision. And, you know, and this, the committee here has been working on this for a long time. I think that was evident this evening's in Steve's station. It has been thought through, and now it's going to be switching hats. As a citizen, I really think that it's something that the voters should be able to vote on.
I keep flashing back to the fire department, which was voted on. I was in between, it wasn't on the slope for a couple of years. Everybody thought it was too big, and I know people were getting really upset that you know, we had. I heard from firefighters in Richmond, where I grew up, I knew some of those still saying we had a fire chief that was an empire builder. And it was an unfair criticism. And now I think we're realizing that, you know, that was the right decision to make at the time. But the fire department has already pressed for space. And the police department too. I was happy to drive through the old fire department over here before the police department was built on that drive-by voting day that we had. But my point is that you know, there's never gonna be a good time to incur a expense like this, whether it's 15 or even less, and certainly not be good for more. But I think it's something that I would like to see the voters weigh in on. Something I would probably vote for, although I don't like paying taxes. I'm in favor, you know, I mean, we are the third lowest municipal property tax rate in Chittenden County. And I've worked hard to be, you know, keep that the way it is, but I think this is an important thing. I think Greta, you're right with, you know, the library is critically important. And the fact that we have to pull a book off the shelf to get a new book on, I was gonna make a quip that's a little bit political. We need a Williston American Activities Committee to start deciding. See. You got the historical. Yeah, that's what Congressman Nixon was on in the 1950s. Anyway, but I think the project is needed, and I think we should put it out in the project. But I guess the next question is that there's no formal action, but do we want to give a formal direction to management or?
I would still like to see the numbers, but I can be outvoted if you don't care to see the numbers.
Okay. Other people?
And I would like to see the capital campaign given as much time as possible to start approaching folks to start making those asks, so that when we get to. You know, the point where we need to actually, you know, write out the wording for town meeting day and for the vote, that we have a sense of like what we're really gonna be asking for. That, you know, we can, part of selling it will be, hey, we've got this much, you know, promised, through the capital campaign. So that's where I'm at.
Theoretically, we're talking 2 weeks between now and Labor Day before our next meeting, right? I don't think the capital campaign is gonna do a whole lot of work.
No, certainly not. I think, but, you know, I mean, for me personally too, I think a lot of these items, you know, again, you know, while it's important to have a sense of like, you know, what the potential projected cost might be. Some of these items are really far out again, and this is what we have here and now, and this is what the community has been asking for and wanting. And so I think, you know, while I totally agree, I mean, we need to look at the big picture. This is what we have here now. This is what the community has collectively been working for a very long time.
A library project, maybe not a $15 million library project.
Yes, but this is, but the nature of tariffs and the nature of, you know, all of these things is just compounding.
Yes, yes,
So-
and square footage, yeah.
So is there any way that we could get the numbers that you want to get and put this on for the next agenda, at the next meeting?
Sure.
That way, with the data and.
Yep.
Aaron, is that doable?
Yeah, I just wanna make sure our staff is clear what, you know, what the board is asking for exactly. So building off of what Shirley produced for the July 15th meeting. Do you want just additional capital, you know, larger scale capital projects, and what's the time horizon for those? Do we wanna build an operating budget assumption, percent increases each year in relation to tax rates? Just wanna make sure we get everything.
I'm worried about the capital. I mean, whoever's in the select board will have to deal with the operating budget increases.
What's the ratio of debt? I'm interested in, what's the ratio of debt?
Yeah, is there a number for debt?
There were $1.4 million in the FY 27 operating budget for debt service.
Is there a number that towns are should carry or shouldn't carry?
Right, it's the ratio, you know, the percentage of debt that will carry.
And the budget. I can, I'll put it into a more polished manner, just to make sure we get the right numbers and context with the board.
But because like earlier this year, the industrial avenue footbridge needed to be replaced. We were able to come up with that money, that was $1 million. Because we had a great ratio of debt, our debt wasn't so high in the town that we couldn't do an emergency fix like that.
We used the pool of, we used the ARPA funds there to cover that, so we were fortunate to have that extra.
Ratio of distance. Just we had the money.
Right, but if all of a sudden, all that money we have goes towards capital. And we don't have any options when something else comes up, that's all. Just the ratio of debt, I mean, just like we have our budget at home, you know?
So so before we were tracking the minutes, you'd also asked for like what kind of debt to operating expenses do other towns carry, right?
Right, operating versus capital.
No, the bond bank would say like, when starting to get a little hinky when the town's got, 35% of its budget is tied up in long-term debt, or something like that, if there's even a number out there for municipalities.
There could be some GFOA benchmarks, and you could look at some comp communities in Chittenden County, similar budget sizes potentially. And all relative to what type of services are provided to from the general fund. So if we look at just the general fund, not water, sewer, just concentrate the general fund here. So is the time horizon you're looking at, Gene, is it 7 years, 10 years, 5 years?
Well, it's gotta be at least 10 years because someone's project going to start.
So we can certainly model out, especially like large capital equipment, like we have a fire engine that's gonna be due for replacement. We flagged the board here. And I think over that 10 years, we can check the apparatus schedule there. But what's kind of the threshold, we have a year to year kind of rolling stock equipment and cruisers, or is there kind of a minimum cost threshold? Is it like $1 million plus capital projects?
Yeah, I mean, and I know there's some, I'd say $1 million plus, because some of the other things we take care of with the capital, in the operating budget, right, like putting in capital.
$1 million plus capital projects that would require public financing to look at a portion of it.
I mean, the only other thing, and this could be footnotes, is I know. My intent is to have a reasonable outlook on these large things. I'm not worried about the fact that, pencils are gonna cost more, electricity might go up 3%, but. When the town chose to add 9 firemen, that was kind of a big deal. So I don't know if there's anything that's, just any sort of step incremental things that we should worry about as well, but they'd have to be very large for me to be concerned.
So Eric, I did say, you're talking about the next board meeting, I'm out next week. And I have a deadline for state reporting before I leave Friday. So I'm not sure that I can do all this work for the third. To be completely realistic.
Meeting after that.
Sure.
You can chat out there, just Thank you, just want to make sure I get the board when it's.
And meanwhile, I don't think that there's any way to, well, I can't talk to Mike, but for me, there's no way I'm gonna vote against having a library project in March on them. At this point, the only way it really just blew up and we decided, I can't imagine that we are not going to have a library bond in March, so. Feel comfortable feel comfortable getting started, thinking about their capital campaign. I don't think there's a risk to that. I don't think we're not gonna do this. I think we're gonna put it out there. I just wanna have all the data. So that I feel like I'm making an informed decision.
So a piece we were thinking there is if the board decided it wants to decrease the scope of the project and try to get the costs down. That will take a few months to work that out, and we're fundraising for one scope, the scope changes.
Yeah, so I really just can't make the material and start going out, but that's not gonna happen in the next couple of weeks anyway, so. Certainly start figuring out how you're gonna raise the money.
We continue that work. I'm just wanting the board's kind of consensus to warn this at its town meeting or a different date next year before that kind of kicks into full campaign mode at that point. We'll certainly continue the kind of pre-work.
I think we've all kind of been in consensus that it should be talking,
I'd support that.
Have we instructed enough?
I'm so.
Sorry.
It's like, the library, can, is that enough direction kind of on pretty good, but a capital campaign at this point?
Yes, typically at this point, you have, you develop a committee to start making those asks of potential larger donors. And the other part of this, I think, is public awareness of the project. We have heard that some people aren't familiar with the project. So making sure you're going out to the community and letting them know what the project looks like and what the costs to be. So that you have an informed citizenry about the project. So those two things, both we can do planning on to make sure we're ready to go. If the board does decide to move forward with putting it on for a long. Yes, we can continue to plan this.
That's essentially what we're just for the discussion.
Okay, that being said, can I hold on to the next agenda?
Thank you, everybody.
So that would be the Marshall Avenue intersection scoping study.
Speaking of that.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So Eric, I could ask you to do a brief intro for.
So this is a continued discussion of the board is looking at the Marshall Avenue South intersection scoping study. Had a couple discussions on this as the report's been in process, looking at possible preferred alternatives. So the consultant from Stan Tech along with folks from the RBC and Public Works Director here this evening. Overall, we look for direction towards a preferred alternative for the report this evening. And once that is selected, that allows this project, this scoping report to be finalized, and that's the town and think about next steps in this project. Cool. You want me to project it or you want to?
If you could project it,
Yeah,
you had it.
Select it.
So we've been,
There you
thank you. So, yes, as mentioned, we've been working with, the town, DPW Director Bruce Shore, as well as, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, for the scoping study at the intersection of Marshall Avenue and South Avenue Road. So tonight we'll do a brief, project background. We will, emphasize the revised alternatives since our last, time here. And, we'll, open up for your feedback and we'll talk about next steps and talk about section about the preferred alternative.
So the project is located along the corridor of Marshall Ave, at South Brownell Road. This corridor is characterized, by a mix of both industrial and commercial land use. With the major retail center Williston being located just east of the intersection. This intersection sees a heavy amount of traffic, driven in part by recent development to the west of the intersection. Also sees a heavy amount of truck traffic, which is consistent with the industrial land use of this area.
So here we have what we refer to as the purpose and needs statement. This encapsulates what it is we're trying to accomplish with the study. And it is used to guide the development of alternatives as well as the evaluation of those alternatives. So with that, the purpose of this project is to develop concepts to improve intersection safety and operations
to meet the needs of all transportation users traveling through this intersection. Recognizing the importance of this intersection in the transportation system for the town of Williston, the following needs for the project have been identified. There is a need to upgrade the traffic signal system. There is a need to improve pedestrian facilities. There is a need to update lane configuration, and there is a need to improve drainage and stormwater management.
This shows the no-build alternative, which is existing conditions at the intersection right now, so if no improvements or changes were made. It also shows the existing culvert along the eastbound approach that was implemented as a temporary solution that will be addressed in the following alternatives. While it's unlikely that this alternative will be chosen as the preferred alternative, it's used as a baseline comparison for the other alternatives. So this is the second alternative, the traffic signal system redesign. This alternative has not been changed since the previous select board meeting, but I'll briefly go over, review key features. So this is a signal replacement as the current signal system reaches the end of its service life, as well as full depth reconstruction due to the impacts from heavy trucks making turning movements at this intersection. This alternative includes signal ahead warning signs along each approach. It would also include street lighting analysis and design to ensure street lighting at the intersection is up to date with current lighting standards. The lane configuration would also be updated, so the eastbound and westbound approach would have a dedicated left turn lane, and the northbound approach, which currently has a dedicated right turn lane, would be become a dedicated left turn lane instead. This was based on turning movement volumes at this intersection. This alternative would also include realigning crosswalks and adding directional pedestrian ramps, so detectable warning surfaces would line up directly with crosswalks. Corner geometry would also be updated to include truck turning aprons to accommodate large trucks. And lastly, a drainage analysis and design would be completed, which includes replacing the existing culvert that I mentioned previously along the eastbound approach, as well as implementing drainage and ditching improvements. The third alternative is the roundabout alternative. This alternative was modified and revised from the previous select board meeting. So this alternative just takes the existing intersection configuration and converts it to a roundabout configuration. The previous iteration was 120 feet in diameter, while this roundabout is 150 feet in diameter, similar to the Waterbury roundabout. This was done in order to accommodate all trucks that will be utilizing this intersection. The approach lanes and circulatory roadway are both, they're all 18 feet wide. And the truck apron surrounding the central island is also 18 feet wide. This truck apron would be a maximum of 2 inches high, but could go down to 1 inch or even less. But this would ultimately be determined during the design phase. Also, truck aprons were added to 2 of the corners to further accommodate large truck movements. And splitter islands, which are medians forcing vehicles to slow down as they enter the roundabout, have also been modified to accommodate these larger trucks. So these changes have been made in particular for the most restrictive vehicle at this intersection, the lowboy trailer, which carries oversized construction equipment and has a maximum ground clearance of 6 inches. The roundabout alternative would also include roundabout warning signs in advance of each approach. It would have similar street lighting and drainage analysis and design, as previously mentioned in the signal alternative. And lastly, the crosswalks would be realigned and
rectangular rapid flashing beacons would be added in order to alert drivers, oncoming drivers that pedestrians are crossing.
Here, we show the traffic operations analysis. Traffic operations are not a concern driving study, but it is something that we evaluate as part of all scoping studies. Either the signal alternative or the roundabout alternative would accommodate, traffic, well into the future. And so they both accommodate the traffic, just fine.
So turning movements, for the signal alternative were completed for a WB 67, which is one of the largest and most restrictive sized trucks. This is part of the design process and was done to verify that the trucks are able to make all necessary turns without encroaching on opposing lanes. Based on these truck turning templates, which are conservative, we included truck aprons on each of the corners to accommodate these movements. Similarly, we performed a truck turning analysis for the roundabout. We made sure to analyze turning movements for the most restrictive vehicles based on input from landowners at previous select board meetings. So this graphic shows the low boy, which is the most restricted vehicle entering this roundabout. Again, it carries oversized construction equipment and has a maximum ground clearance of 6 inches. The truck aprons were added to accommodate these movements, with the truck cab remaining in the circular roadway, while only the truck mounts the actual apron itself.
True.
Sorry, but there. We also completed turning movements using a DMAG, which is a mobile crane unit. This specific truck is able to move through roundabouts without the cab or trailer mounting the apron, and is not as restrictive as the low boy trailer in this case. This is showing one more additional type of DMAG, which again is a mobile crane unit. And again, this truck is able to move through this roundabout without the cab or trailer mounting the apron on either corner or the circular apron that surrounds the central island.
Here we have the evaluation matrix, which compares the alternatives, including the no-build alternative, for comparison. So the single alternative comes in at a total project cost of approximately $3.1 million, while the roundabout comes in at a total project cost of approximately $4.6 million. In terms of meeting the purpose and need, both alternatives sufficiently meet the purpose and need. The first need is updating the traffic signal system. The signal alternative replaces that traffic signal system with a brand new system. The roundabout provides an alternative solution. Both of these alternatives improve pedestrian facilities, bringing them up to ADA compliance. The signal updates the lane configuration, while the roundabout provides an alternate solution for lane configuration. And both alternatives would improve drainage and stormwater management. They both would include full depth reconstruction to mitigate the damage incurred with the heavy use of this intersection by heavy vehicles. In terms of impacts, both sufficiently take care of traffic operations. The roundabout tends to provide even better operations for traffic capacity than signal. They both address frequency and severity of crashes, although this is not a high crash location. However, roundabouts do tend to have a greater impact on reducing the frequency and severity of crashes. In terms of right of way, they both would have right of way impacts. However, there is a large difference there with the signal coming in at a little shy of 4,000 square feet of right-of-way impacts, while the roundabout would be 14 close to 15,000 square feet of right-of-way impacts on the properties adjacent to the intersection. Neither signal or roundabout alternative would have impacts to environmental or cultural resources. They would both require some utility coordination, and they would both address stormwater and improve drainage. In terms of looking ahead at project costs, we looked at various scenarios of increase in costs as time goes on. And so here we're showing a scenario where project costs increase by 3% per year, so that the numbers that we just shared with you for total project costs in 2025, if this were constructed 5 years out in 2030, the signal would come in at a total project cost of $3.7 million, while the roundabout will come in at a total project cost of $5.4 million. And if that were extended out to 2035, the signal would come in at $4.3 million for total project costs, and the roundabout would come in at $6.3 million for total project costs. And so with that, we'd like to open it up to any input, any comments or questions. It is our stance that either alternative would sufficiently meet the purpose and need, and would take care of the intersection well into the future. And so we wanted to see what the select board is feeling in terms of a preference of either of the alternatives. Questions? No, let's move forward.
Yeah, maybe just answer this, because I was a little surprised when you were talking about the, what you call it, level of service delay, all that, I recall it, but what do you call it, the operation?
Traffic operations.
Traffic operations. Because when I looked through this earlier, it's like, well, it's gonna cost me $1.5 million to get the queue from, cut in half. But you're kind of saying that both of these are in a reasonable range for this kind of intersection, so. Yeah, you could cut it in half again if you wanted to, but it's not really gonna make a difference to the average person having to go through that intersection.
That's correct.
It's a 180-foot queue, how many cars is that?
So that's about 4 cars, so for a passenger vehicle, we estimate 25 feet per passenger vehicle.
That's a big vehicle.
Well, kind of spacing out with the.
We're assuming that people are not crashing out when you go to fun in this scenario, yeah.
About.
Now, I understand stoplight, if someone pushes a walk button, you gotta light it. So everybody gets a red light, it allows someone to cross. How does a roundabout work?
Sure, it's a great question. So it is a little bit different. So with the roundabout, we would have 2 crosswalks, the same crosswalks as with the traffic signal. However, the roundabout would use what we refer to as rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or RRBs, and might be familiar with them locally. Basically, the pedestrian pushes the button, and there's an amber flashing light that indicates to motorists that there is a pedestrian ready to cross. And so it is not the same as receiving a red light, but it is, it indicates to the motorist that there's somebody entering the crosswalk, and so they stop. There's also a yield line in advance of that crossing. And so this is a common treatment at roundabouts in order to alert motorists of pedestrians crossing.
Thank you, and you think of an intersection with lights, who maintains the lights? It depends on the intersection, who would maintain these lights? And if there's a roundabout, what type of maintenance would be required to keep the, the roundabout operational?
Sure.
You know, like snow plowing and. Well, it's needed, for the, what are the operational costs of after it's built?
Sure. So that's a great question. So, a signal, typical service life, 20 to 30 years. The signal is, 30 years old. And so, but, during that time period, there are, maintenance and replacements that need to be made. Bulbs go out, pieces of electric equipment, need to be replaced and whatnot. In terms of a roundabout, they're, generally much more durable. And so, you would have similar needs in terms of, pavement maintenance, drainage maintenance and whatnot. In terms of snow plowing, generally you would plow the central island. That's what they do in Waterbury. It works fine. And so that would be, part of the town's, snow plowing, operations. But, it is not, an undue, burden, listening to feedback from other locations with a similar size roundabout like Waterbury.
We have our town expert here. How does Bruce feel about maintaining a roundabout? Is it gonna be an easier job than a main intersection?
I like roundabouts better than I like signalized intersections. In this case, it comes down to what you guys prefer because of the costs. And what the properties of the four corners may say about impacting more of their property by putting the roundabout. Although if you look at the picture, I don't want to say it's, well, I will say it's property that they're not necessarily using right now for parking or those kinds of things. As far as maintenance is concerned, I'm not a roundabout versus a signalized intersection. Give me an intersection without lights on it any day of the week. The signalized intersections are not fun to take care of. We're always tweeting, we only have 4 of them. Right now, we're going to spend $10,000 just on one of them on Marshall Ave. So bring some of it up to speed. So there's the rapid flash beacons. You have 6 crossings now, maybe 8 in the town of Williston that we're responsible for. Very little maintenance problems with them. Couple batteries we've replaced, few computer boards here and there, but very low maintenance compared to a pedestrian traffic signal where they push a button. Gets that signal, it interrupts all the traffic all the way around the whole intersection. Much better. So if you want my opinion, the roundabout is the way to go.
Thank you.
But the cost, again, it's a lot to go from one to the other. And I can't tell you that the maintenance for that signalized intersection over 20 or 30 years will be $1.5 million.
Won't ROI.
I don't know if you folks have this information, but is there any data on the economic and environmental impact on a roundabout versus signalized? I would assume, but what do I know, that a roundabout would be less exhaust from the cars if you're just sitting there idling. And therefore, I suppose it'd be a very small amount of money that you spend in gas and waiting for the light to turn green, but you would be doing that. Is there any kind of data on that?
There is, some research in the literature, that looks at those types of things, and just like you said, a roundabout tends to keep traffic moving. And so, compared to a signalized intersection where part of every cycle is a red light, particularly during peak hours of the day. And so during that red light, vehicles on those approaches come to a complete stop. And generally are emitting emissions, while they're idling. and, burning gasoline as they're doing so. Whereas roundabout, keeps vehicles moving, and so you don't get that same idling. And so, yeah, there is, a reduction in that energy as well as just the, micro local, air quality, for those at the intersection, whether they're drivers or pedestrians.
I'm glad you asked that question, Ted, because I actually wanted to say that around that is environmental, you just thinking about it, the traffic keeps moving. And cars today, my pickup truck's one of them, you stop at the red light and shuts off.
Shuts off.
It's not, to me, that's not real convenient all the time.
Well, I'm just thinking about who is physically located at that intersection. There is a lot of small humans that spend a lot of time outside, right at that intersection, breathing in that exhaust all the time, so. Something to think about.
I was thinking about them when I was looking at what it would take to go for a walk now, because it's much further. Much further than if you were trying to go, from one corner to that diagonal corner. It looks like a lot further walk, so I was a little bit concerned about that. So it's true.
And that is
Not for you.
Not one of that's walk.
adding on to, to those considerations of idling traffic and, young children in the vicinity. We do know that there is a large percentage of heavy vehicles, trucks, oversized vehicles that frequent this intersection. And so part of that idling is coming from diesel exhaust of, heavy vehicles.
There you go. I started looking at this going like, well, it's no difference. Why are we spending all that money? But now I'm thinking maybe it's worth it. So.
There's also some electricity that goes along with the, operation of a traffic signal, over the decades, which you don't have with the,
And I know you're all smart enough to realize that we're talking about the 2030 numbers at the very earliest. Just if you were to say tonight, we want to go around about, it'll take us that long to get the plans and permits and everything together to be able to build.
I usually, I was gonna ask that question, this is, sorry, not for you, but the town probably would put 100% of that bill in there. None of this will take till 2030, right,
Yeah, I'm thinking, since I've been here, we had to do the bridge replacement over Muddy Brook, but Bruce, to fund this, you think.
is it common to get?
Between bond funding, we potentially could use some transportation impact fees on something like this.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Start saving the transportation impact fees and decide how that portfolio is gonna go.
And we go after any kind of grants.
Yeah.
But the town's still gonna put a good part of its bill, just not that kind of money out there. Unless somebody comes out and says, well, we want to go a bunch of roundabouts, we think they're great, here's a lot of money you can go to. We hold my breath on that. Stranger things have happened.
We've been using our transportation impact fees to save towards trailer paint quite a while, so. I think we have to amend our impact bylaws to this project potential language, but as part of that prioritization, we're successful with trailer lane being built as part of the TIF project as well as you have to utilize those impacts going forward. That's a significant amount of impact fees on transportation infrastructure. You want invested in your physical road and pass-through infrastructure from creditors and
We've taken the comments that we've received as well about the truck traffic around here, and that's why this roundabout got bigger. So that we can make sure that we accommodate the kind of industrial uses that are happening at this location, when we heard about the local ways, and I'm glad they did the crane. So that's why this went from 120 to 150 feet, because one of my comments was, if we're gonna do this, let's not shortchange it, let's make sure we're building the right thing. Rather than try to say this will fit and should work, this would work.
And we also reached out to Bill Woodruff, from Waterbury, and, to inquire how well the roundabout is going there, which is, similarly 150 feet. And he got back to us and said it's working very well, that truck operations are very smooth. Very large vehicles are going through there regularly. And the only problem he's seen over the years, or the only time he's seen over the years where there had to be an adjustment in order to get an oversized vehicle, was related to either like a very large wind turbine or like a I-beam for a bridge, where they had to make an accommodation, with the escort vehicle and going the wrong way. But, generally speaking, they're very happy with that roundabout. So this would be a similar configuration as that one.
And we got super loads like that, you're making concessions
Everywhere.
It's stuff, so.
Have we been back in touch with the stakeholders, like in that vicinity, the folks with that large heavy equipment and the different folks who came to the last meeting to talk about this, like, have they seen these updated models, do we know?
I took a call from one property owner this morning, and that they both voiced their support for this project, either alternative, and they said, the roundabout is one they felt made sense. I believe both would be improvement.
And the other property owner, Sierra Woods owner, when that gentleman was here, he wasn't necessarily opposed to the roundabout, he just wanted to make sure.
That's, yeah, absolutely, but then this is taking time.
Can I provide some clarification?
Yeah.
Actually, the owner of CRW.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's time.
Yeah, it is,
Yeah, but if you look at a couple things, first of all, I personally cross, because I run sometimes at lunch and my car gets repaired across the street. I know from a personal level, I much prefer to have a very solid light, a walkway rather than a light and somebody coming around the corner. So that concerns me. Just for my own personal safety, because I do it several times a week. I don't know if anybody else has walked that area at all, but I certainly like seeing the strong signal there. On top of that, we sell old frames. That's one of the products that we sell, and the two model folks use as your samples. I don't believe there's either of those that will stick. The Tony Steel Records and DeMagbergers both have 4-axle truck frames. They have single tandem steer in the front, solid in the back. So I could provide you folks with some additional turning radius information. So that'd be helpful.
I will say that we got these trucks from the individual that was here representing the business.
That's Ryan from my office, but I don't know where he got those, but neither of those models are. So. One of those is a 4-axle all-terrain crane. They're all-wheel steer, those can turn on time. There's none of those in the city of Williston. My knowledge.
Can I ask you how to cranes that they were saying, how do those compare to a low boy trailer?
I could to be honest. Totally, obviously pivots at a certain area, so obviously in front, so I honestly don't know enough about it, but I can provide you with the specs of the machines that are fitted for machines that are in the area. One of them sort of matches up with dramatic, anyhow, we're getting into the weeds here a little bit. But I can provide you with that information, whether it has an impact or not. The other piece is if you look at on the roundabout, and who's most effective would be our organization by far. And when we built the facilities back in 2020, the appeal certainly was the location, the traffic that was going by and that sort of thing. And based on what I can see, it certainly does cut into where we have our permanent equipment pack, where we have equipment on display as well as our signage. So that's a big concern for us, and for myself and my brother who own the property.
Sure, and something I'll mention regarding that is, in design, this could be shifted, towards the northwest. Reducing the impacts from your parcel, and staying away from the parking area of the parcel on the northwest. So that it is possible to reduce that, to maintain.
The one comment, because again, I get my car serviced across the street, which is at Gil's point, and talking to them. And looking at what's currently in place, it looks like it would take care of it, it would take out a portion of their stormwater pond.
So that would all be stormwater, yeah, that would all be reconfigured and.
I know that was just one of his concerns for my nation. So, I certainly have quite a bit of concerns with the increased size. We certainly need to have trucks and people go by. There's other equipment dealers
and Williston, South Burlington, here in the area. But my brother and I are certainly in support or are confident in support of the roundabout, so I just want to make sure. Not to mention the additional cost, and what we're saying is that both are acceptable solutions based on what you folks have testified to, or presented, I should say. So.
I'm sorry, you said you're not in support of the roundabout?
Of the roundabout, not at all. In a big way, I mean, there's a big portion of property there that's gonna be cut off that we use for our current equipment display, which is high visibility. Being at that intersection,
We won't be able to use it unless we bought it from you, correct?
that's correct. But we don't want to sell
The answer is that.
it. You know, it's not about money. Yes, yeah, it's really more about what we bought the property for and how we use it. I mean, we're obviously not the only stakeholder, so I don't want to be really talking about that, I understand that, but again, the comment about cars and the carbon footprint piece, which is important to me personally. A lot of the newer cars obviously shut off when you hit stop, and there's more and more electric vehicles in the state of Vermont as well, so I think it's diminishing, or it will continue to diminish over time, I suspect. And I wonder if anybody's had any conversations with the daycare. As a pretty substantial stakeholder.
The daycare in the north.
I didn't hear you.
I asked if anybody had had a conversation with the people that run the daycare on the corner about.
Southwest.
It's Jason Adams' property, and we have talked to Jason Adams.
But not to their.
Well, we talked to the property owner.
Okay. Yeah, I see them, you know, because we've been there, again, 25 years now. We've seen, and I can't say I've seen it in the last few weeks, but you know, there have been times when we've seen. The kids have a lot of times they've come over to our place for Halloween, pre-COVID, quite honestly. But, you know, they are pedestrians and kids and strollers and such that have happened over the years. So I would be concerned, personally, I'd be concerned about that. Thank you for your.
Valuable input we're speaking of.
So where did that bring us?
Will change my mind.
Well, the intersection is less expensive, it solves the problem, and it's probably more feasible, given what we just heard.
Given our previous conversation about funding.
Yes, exactly, so while I like the idea, I also, I've been to that roundabout and. I don't know too about it's huge, I'm just trying to picture it. You know, it just seemed, I think it functions well because it's large, I feel like small roundabout, the big ones, but it does seem like. Because of accommodating. Large vehicles, this thing has got really big, it may be big for our needs. So.
Well, and looking at I mean, the price tag and the differential between the two. Models just gets larger over time. You know, currently it's estimated at 1.5 million difference if we were to do it now, and by 2030 with the project would actually potentially having a $2 million difference. I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, you're right, it's a lot of money, but that gap is just getting bigger, so.
So it sounds like we might be ready for a pushing.
Is it alternative to, what's the intersection versus roundabout?
Alternative 2 is the intersection of.
Alternative 1 was not. Okay, I move to designate alternative 2 as preferred alternative for the Marshall Avenue and South Brown Hill intersections, Scotland side.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Okay.
Any nays? Yeah.
Public input.
Thank you.
Public input is very important, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll miss you though. Third time will come, right? About this. We'll be back probably. Yeah, we'll probably find those projects.
Maybe there'd be another opportunity.
Now we're all in support of.
Yeah, now we're all about intersections. Let's hope the drying bed at the wastewater plant is not so hard a decision.
Yeah, so next item, drying bed capital project with wastewater plant. Bruce? Good evening again. Eric, if you
Yeah, I can give a brief introduction. So this is a project the Tri-Town community's been looking at since our community Essex Junction have shared ownership in our wastewater treatment plant. This would be an improvement to the plant at drying beds. This will have material from cleaning the pump stations to be deposited, let it dry, or disposing of it, things you shouldn't flush down the drain, rags, wipes, things of that nature. Letting them dry out as opposed to paying to have heavy wet materials separated all the way for a waste management. This project estimate right now it's around $200,000. The three communities would split it. That estimate held our share to about $67,000. Our staff's bringing forward to the select board consider using some of our funding from our rate stabilization fund for this project. Currently has a balance of over $400,000.
No, it's wrong. Get new numbers.
Get a new number.
It's a little bit more.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I knew it was.
Don't hear that very often.
So I'll try to persist a second. There's no policy of the Tri-Town Committee of any floor for that fund. It's that should be maintained for further discussion by the Tri-Town Committee and our member communities. But these funds are Williston's choose to do what it would like with. Should officer now suggestion is they would be appropriate use for one-time capital projects like this to consider. We're looking for direction from the board for like to proceed with this project and potentially utilize the rate stabilization fund to cover both share. The other communities rate stabilization fund balance is significantly lower than Williston's currently. It's possibly other communities may ask Williston if it would like to pay for the entire project. Enter into agreements for repayment of shares with other communities. The select board did receive that request and have decided on terms if we consider entering into such an agreement. I've been told that could be a request that town receives. Depending on direction from the select board, the next step would be for staff to continue discussion about this project, try to committee. Ultimately, there's no select board policy on the rate stabilization fund. Utilize that some of it for a capital project. Historically, the town's let this fund kind of roll over and be held year to year. It's that rainy day, dry day fund. We try to predict flows at the beginning of the year. If we end up needing to, if there's additional flows we didn't budget for, we'll draw some from that fund. If there's not as much surplus, then rolling that surplus into this each year, we have the alternative of getting that back and then going to the net position of the sewer fund. Something that the town hasn't really considered a policy, so it's what bringing to you to get some direction while considering this.
So much learning to do in this job.
So the Tri-Town agreement is set up with this idea of this rate stabilization fund, although that's not available. It's just another term that's come up in the past couple of years. Used to call it the dry day fund or rainy day fund. But in the original agreements for the Tri-Town, it said that, at the end of every year, when things were balanced out, we owed money, we paid money. If there was surplus money, it would go back to the towns. The towns had never asked for that money back. And they just let it build up over the years. And it goes all the way back. The list I have in front of me is back to fiscal year 13, but this was certainly going on before that. I have no record that the town ever asked for to get this money to come back. And there have been times when we had to take money out of this fund because we didn't budget correctly or the flows were a little higher. So anyway, right now, and then to go back to the drying beds real quick, the Tri-Town the plant has a list of priorities of items that need to be done over the years to build their capital plans, and the drying beds are on that capital plan. All the other things that are on there are directly associated with the plant and like putting a generator in or upgrading this piece of equipment or that piece of equipment, which benefits all three users, but not as much as this drying bed will benefit down in Williston individually because of the cleaning of our pump stations. We check our pump stations 3 times a week, clean the screens at least once a week, and then have a really full-blown cleaning about 3 or 4 times a year, depending upon how big flows are and what's happening. Stuff that comes out of there, we can't take just to the plant, dump it into the plant. It has to go into a drying unit. And once again, as like Gary explained, literally just to let that lay there, dry out, so we're not paying to get rid of the water, the weight. The closest drying beds are in Winooski. We have the ability to go to Winooski, although I had never done that, because to go to Winooski, we use the beds, then we have to send our equipment or trucks to Winooski every once in a while, maybe even only once a year, and do our share of cleaning them out. Well, for Essex or Essex Junction, that's not really that far. For us, it's not quite as convenient to send them over in trucks. So we have been able to, because we maintain ours a little bit more, we don't have to clean our pump stations. It says 3 or 4 times a year seems like a lot, but Essex and Essex Junction that don't have trash racks is what it's called. So it comes in, there's a rack that actually picks up all the stuff that we don't want in the sewer. The guys go down with buckets and scoop it out.
That's a job I don't know.
That's a fun job. Yeah. So, but the trash racks help a lot, keep all that stuff out of the pumps. That you don't even want people to know what goes into the sewers, but,
I'm sorry, Bruce, so what do we do with that stuff now? Do we take it to Winooski or we don't?
we take it to, no, we've been lucky enough that we're keeping ours clean enough that we are able to take it right over to the plant. But there are times where we don't go over there. Chelsea said, no, I'm not taking that stuff. So the drying beds are on that list. We have discussed it in the Tri-Town about, building the drying beds. We don't have to get permits to do it because the plant's already permitted. It would benefit all the communities, benefit us immensely. And it was my suggestion, I haven't even given you the number yet, but it was my suggestion that maybe, because we have such a large pot of money, that we could even do the build and then come up with some kind of agreement where they pay us back. And Williston has done that before. Williston has put it upgrades over there at 100% of our cost. But in that case, we got allocation. Well, we're not gonna get any allocation.
That's gonna be my question, is that there is any possibility.
We don't get allocated. But, it will certainly benefit us because then when we're doing these cleanings, we don't have to worry about whether she's gonna take it or not. And it's not against Chelsea, she's just protecting the plant and doing her job. Whether she's gonna take it or not, we know we can go to the drying beds, dump this stuff off. And if they want us to go there and help clean them out once a year or whatever, on our rotation, going over the bridge and we're there. So if we did say, let's do this, and we made an agreement with them to pay us back, we could even just say, we'll pay for it. And you can track it the next 20 years, we may never have to go clean a drying bed. But anyway, so the estimate right now that we have over there, it's just an estimate, because they're getting ready to go through the audit and everything else too. Last year we had $436,000. This year we got, just an estimate, $649,311. Right over there. So.
In 1 year?
No. Cumulative.
Oh, I think it was 430 last year and now it's 6.
We had 212,000, but we didn't spend last year that we paid for sewer flows. That went on to that, so now it's 649,000. Estimate, once again, just wanted me to make sure that everybody understood it, that's just an estimate.
Maybe you'll build us a library.
I was gonna say, he's gonna put in charge of the money.
This is sewer fund.
They need a sewer.
But anyway, there's plenty of money there right now that we could take care of these drying beds whatever the agreement ends up being with that. And it's certainly not gonna hurt. We're still gonna end up with $400,000 over there, which I would say. We at the Tri-Town have talked more than once about what that number should be that we leave behind, all three of us. Should it be $150,000 a year? If you get above that, you get that money back. If you get below that, you gotta make it up, so you keep that kind of money there. So we'll never come up that hard and fast, no, but it's certainly not over $500,000. So we have money there that we should be asking to get back. I would just ask that before Williston makes a decision on what that number should be, you let us keep working with our partners in the Tri-Town to see what all three towns are comfortable with for that number at the bottom.
Well, I don't know if we can address that question, but the drying bed thing just seems like a no-brainer. I'm happy with you.
I mean, it's,
Pursue
with anything costs, we're just gonna go up if we put it off, and this seems like it's something that, you know, we're spending money to ultimately save some money, right? So, yeah, I think.
Yeah. So would we do that in the form of a loan with interest? Because, right, if we pulled back some of our balance, because we have way more than anyone else, it would be invested.
Yeah.
And we earn money, so we lost our opportunity if we don't charge something.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I necessarily agree with that, because once again, it depends on what kind of agreement we come up with. If it comes down to the fact that we don't ever have to maintain those things, then you know, we're not losing any money.
Well, I think all we need to do is, all we're asked to do is let you go back and negotiate it, right?
Yeah, if you're open to using, you know, rate stabilization funds towards at least Wilson share this project and however we structure it, if we front it, then come up with a deal. Yeah, if you're comfortable with that direction tonight, then first go back to the Tri-Town dialogue. Kind of see where, you know, more formalized proposal would think.
Yeah, I think, man, you would know best if, and, you know, surely if it makes sense to charge interest or do in-kind services or whatever, like, you know, that's. Yeah.
And the question of how much that balance should be, that sounds like you guys are already kicking it around, so. It does seem, I don't know how they're investing it or what they're doing with it, so if it's sitting there just making money for Essex, that's not.
Well, I mean, just, you know, I mean, 1 year, the city of Essex Junction. Used $175,450 out of what they had over there, so that was their deficit, they had to make that money up. So sometimes there can be larger, for us, the largest one's been $47,000. But that doesn't mean that some year that can't be $50,000 or $100,000 to us either, that's why I'm saying. Just allow us to keep working on what that number should be that we all agree on. That's what we think that balance should be, and then the rest of it comes back. I don't disagree, we shouldn't be leaving $600,000 back over there.
The other thing adds up for treatment, Bruce and I talked about in our ordinance, we don't allow someone's connecting to the sewer system. So if you find one in a home, or the homeowner that is disconnected, and that is adding to, we're paying to treat that subgrade water, so those add up to our flows over.
Our flows are way down. I mean, way down. We're getting flows, we're usually in 550 to 600,000 gallons a day. And some days we're not even seeing 500,000 gallons. It's all because of how dry it is in the sump pumps. Well,
Illegal.
I can't wait with all of them. We obviously have some infiltration too. It'd be nice to say, no, we don't. have that. But a lot of it's sump pumps.
Good work.
Yeah. Thanks.
Go get 'em.
Yeah.
Yep.
Unless it's no.
Thank you.
Bring us up to purchasing policy then.
That's for last. And I am not, as you saw from the red line copy, there are lots of changes to these policies. But it 95% of it is all coming from the code federal regulations, which drives our grants and the requirements for our grants. So I really am just going to, and I'll just say, although this has been on our audit management letter comment for years and I haven't had the chance to get to it. The state, the fire department applied for a grant through DPS. And DPS selected us for a financial monitoring review, so this had to be done before they would issue the grant to the fire department. So they have done that now, based on the draft of the purchasing policy, but I have to send them back the final approved policy when we get there. So, additions, affirmative action, language, allowability of cost, and that's all goes with the federal grant agreements, what is allowable under grant, what's not. Expanding the purchasing authority to allow delegation of purchasing by other than department heads to allow. That is not necessarily part of the grant agreements, but trying to help, remove some of that smaller purchasing from department heads as long as it's in a budget line items, and we're typically talking about like an assistant director level. So I added that, and I was really looking at the town of Essex, and I really like how they had theirs done to, if a department head isn't there and you need to buy something, then you have an assistant director who has the authority to do that. We didn't actually have conflict of interest requirements, in our personnel policy. The purchasing policy referred to that, but it was more like ethical considerations. This is truly conflict of interest requirements, and those are now all spelled out in this purchasing policy. The one threshold that has been increased and has nothing to do with the grants is when we require a purchase order. Right now it's $2,000, so somebody in the department is writing that up, it's going to Eric who approves it, and then I keep a copy of that as well, because it's the one public records request that I get 5 times a year is for all of our purchase orders. So $2,000 with the cost of things now is so minimal that we decided to raise it to $4,000 and take a little of the administrative work. And some of the budget line items are so big that certainly seemed reasonable.
I was just I noticed that over on your definition of minor purchases, it's over $2,000, you need to have 2 quotes and possibly 3, yet on this page, you're saying you don't need a purchase order.
Right.
I'm gonna say my overall take on this whole thing is that it's probably more restrictive than I would do on non-federal grant stuff, and so I'm not gonna argue. This is you spent a lot of time on it. I'm not gonna say anything except my comment is, it seems if you're gonna be trying to check for 3 quotes when someone wants to spend $2,100, that's all you're gonna do all day.
Well, and if I miss something, I try to put little caveats in there.
Yeah.
Like for federal dollars, or if it's town funding.
There's a lot of
it's
stuff
little
on
bit
the back, and
different.
like the last page is like, this doesn't apply to, and it has a whole bunch of stuff on there, so.
Yes.
I'm okay, I trust that you went through to fine tooth comb. I was just like, holy smokes, I think our number is like 25 or 30 before you have to have 2 quotes, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the last piece is the bidding process, and again, I had actually, other than Eric, the only other person I had review this was Bruce, because most of this applies to him. And I just wanted him to make sure there was nothing in there that we aren't already doing, and he said really, it really isn't gonna change their process much, they already have in place, so. So those are the changes to this purchasing policy.
The only other comment I had was, it's extremely hard to get 3 bids. Even on big projects. I admit, when everything's got red lines, I kind of skim because it gives me headaches, but, and I didn't notice there was also one, is there an escape clause if you just can't get 3 bids?
There is, and I meant to attach it to the policy, so in the final one we have called a bid waiver form, and it's really not a good name for it, but it is that escape clause, so, or we allow, like Bruce will write a memo and say, I contacted these vendors, but I only got quotes back from these vendors, and so we accept that because he's tried to comply with the policy and he's just not getting the feedback. Or, when we have that emergency purchase or sole source, we use that form and they have to document why we're going that way. So I saw Eric just walk in and I thought, so for the police department, like they use all Motorola equipment. So of course, we wanna be consistent in the equipment, so we just allow them to use the sole source and say we want consistency equipment. Same thing with some of the stuff at the fire department, you want the radios to be consistent, so there is an out, and this refers to the form, and I forgot to attach it, so.
I guess that'd be my only concern from controls or a select board perspective on that. It's like, yes, write it up. Yes, somebody else has to look at it and say, yeah, is that really a sole source or you just got lazy?
Yeah, I would say the majority of ours come through because it's consistency equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to sign off on it, sure, so.
Fair, yeah.
Okay. See, I had 4 tabs and you already answered all my questions, so I'm done.
I think that means you're on to it.
Any other questions? Will be ordered.
We'll move to adopt amendments to the town purchasing policy as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are any against? Motion carries. Sure.
You're welcome.
Manager report.
We also highlight a couple of items. We get our fourth quarter local option tax report for FY 25. We were just about $24,000 below the budget amount for the fiscal year. Good place to end after that first quarter where things were a little, and the state had a little bit longer reporting, so we based the budget on a longer reporting that we prepare us. So it's really, if you look on the report, the rooms and meals tax really has responded well since COVID. It's really helped us out quite a bit there. We had just about $115,000 increase overall net revenue source from FY 24. The local option tax revenue, we're just under 3% increase. For this current FY 26 budget, we budgeted $4.185 million, which is about a $75,000 increase from actuals from FY 25 that was finished. Then I looked at the rolling 3-year average year to year for the increases in actuals for local option tax year to year, it's about $135,000. Then as a reminder, we're gonna have that revenue share change from 70-30 to 75-25 for the state. I checked with the tax department, I said, okay, I didn't see it on this report, so that's effective, it's October 1st, it's effective, so we'll see later here where that change. We should probably hopefully get a couple extra $100,000 from that shift, so. At this point, we're confident that we will be over revenue projection for the local option tax based on just this historical data, and I think we adjusted this quite significantly a couple of years ago to try to get it more aligned with the actuals, so we were significantly be $500,000 over budget on revenue here to try to balance things out. So we'll monitor this closely as we to and need to build FY 27. Looking forward to look at this one.
I was concerned about with the tariffs that we would lose sales, that it would affect sales and that we would lose some of that, but on the other hand, the tariffs make everything more expensive, so if you have to buy it, it's more, so I guess we haven't seen the impact yet.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. To be
That's
25% of our operating revenue right here. So she was for us. Parking lot project, it says we're long, light should be here next year or so. They've got the conduit wiring set, swing foot lights. The new park pavilion is in the park. If you haven't seen it, encourage you to check it out. Looks great. Good job. So that's using ARPA money, so that's a physical asset.
Yes.
Ted and I talked about maybe put a sign up that says funded with federal law.
There's a bunch of projects that the WPA did. A great
Yeah,
impression of it.
Still have signs, yep. And stone.
Then discussing for September 16th meeting, if an earlier start would be feasible, we've been talking about highlighting the stormwater project and where you were looking at daylight and everything. I think that's probably the meeting and not the October meeting. Really maybe a 6:15, 6:30 start, it's probably about a half an hour travel back here and get the regular meeting started by 7:15.
What else should I do?
Yeah, I don't feel locked yet that. Oh.
We're hoping you are at the next one, no?
That's all.
Then we bring us to other business.
The liquor license renewal, Cossack Ron, they opened last year, it's the first and third class renewal, there's been no violations. Staff prevents renewal of their license.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
There are no nays. Carries.
Also, a catering permit for catering cocktails, or actually family barn, it's for a wedding reception with, I will do the patrons.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
I,
Those opposed? The opposed, one abstention, one. That it?
That's all.
Okay, any final thoughts on items on this meeting from this meeting?
Well, thank you for the quarterly report. I think people think that we don't, I don't. Here, but I looked at it. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Aaron's gonna be done getting all that.
thank them all, that was really thorough and informative.
So there is an anticipated executive session motion. Bring us there.
I'll move that we enter executive session to discuss records of interdepartmental communication that are preliminary to any policy or action and exempt from public records law under Title I, Section 313A6, and invite Finance Director Shirley Goodell Lackey, Police Chief Patrick Foley, Police Lieutenant Eric Shepard, and Town Manager Eric Wells to join.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Bye.
Executive session. Public session after that will not be taking any official action in the executive session. So with that, other than the executive session, the meeting is adjourned.